Hello and welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast, where we talk about the fight or fights that so many of us engage in this lifetime, as well as ways to help alleviate those fights. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Let's get started. There are three stories that I remember basically every day of my life, and they have to do with those pivotal moments, those things where it's just like it hits you, and maybe it doesn't necessarily hit you as hard at that time, but it hits you as time goes on. And there are three things that I'd love to impart that I hope help some folks that have to do with the stories from pretty far back in the day now that have really helped change my life for the better. So as most of you know, I got sober when I was 19 years old, and at that point, that gave me the opportunity to have a different life. Getting sober doesn't give anyone a different life other than they're sober, but there's changes that need to happen, and there were certainly changes that need to happen for me in terms of how I conducted myself, how I conducted my life, and et cetera, et cetera. Just, everything about my life. At that age too, I needed to learn. I was still coming up and learning this whole thing called life. So, and not to say that I'm not learning today, but at that time I probably had a lot more to learn, just in terms of the basic building blocks of life. So the first one was, I wasn't planning on going to college. As many of you had read my book, didn't come from a college educated family or anything like that, but I ended up going, and after I got sober, and there were two classes that I remember in college, two classes that I remember out of all the classes that I took in college, and that it struck me in some sort of way. And one of those classes was English 101. It's funny that the two classes were classes that I had my freshman year, but English 101, and we were reading, and I'm pretty sure it was Emerson, but I can't say positively, but there was a quote in a book that struck me, and I don't know the book. Again, I'm pretty sure it was Emerson, but the quote was, "In taking risks, you will triumph." And for whatever reason, that hit me. And when I was younger, I would take risks. I would do, the dare stuff. Oh, somebody dares you to do something and you do it. And I did a lot of that, but I'm not talking about those kind of risks. I'm talking about putting my heart out there. I'm talking about taking, sometimes job risks, starting something new, maybe starting a business, doing something you're not accustomed to, doing something that, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. And all of a sudden you say, you know what, I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to put myself in a position where I can fail. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is put ourselves in a position where we can fail. And, we might fail at what we've been doing for 20 years, but it's a lot easier to fail at something new than it is to fail at something we've been doing for a long time. So I took that quote, "In taking risks, you will triumph," and I carried that with me, and I've been carrying it with me ever since. And, there are certain things that I shouldn't do. There are certain things that the risks are too big or too grave, or just, not intelligent risks. And there are many of those that I've passed up, but there are many of them that I've taken the risk, and I have triumphed. I will say that I've probably failed more in life, maybe by far, than I have succeeded. But those failures were stepping stones to having some success and to doing things differently. Every time I take a risk, I put myself on a little different path, a little different journey. If I continue to do the same things I've been doing for whatever it is, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, it's, it all depends on how old we are. But if I keep doing the things I've been doing, there's a very high likelihood that I'm not going to change my path and I'm not going to change my trajectory. So that's the first one that was very, very important to me. The second one is why I titled my book the way I titled it. I was a freshman in college, and I had just asked somebody to be my mentor, and it was probably the best decision I ever made in life. And my mentor, was someone who I knew had some peace in their life. They had some ability to quiet his mind. He was a very, very studious when it came to exploring life and exploring how to be better and get better and change and those sorts of things. And that's what I wanted. That's what I needed. I needed to change because I was still 19 years old. And I grew up in a blue collar work ethic, walk it off, no pain, no gain. You're not hurt if you're not bleeding out. Those sorts of things. And I don't mean all of those literally, but that was just the way that it was. And that was the way it was in our family. And it was all about wrestling with problems. And it was all about, struggling, fighting, keep fighting, et cetera, et cetera. And I was told by this new mentor, he said, as I was wrestling with some problem or, trying to figure something out or whatever it was. And he said, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. And that hit me at that time. It hit me in a certain way. It didn't hit me as much as it hit me in the years following hearing those words. And there are so many things that I have fought over the years. And there are, whether they're, first it was drugs and alcohol, and then, it's people and it's jobs and it's life and, just the struggle, right? Little did I know as I continued down the path that the biggest struggle that I have is with myself. The biggest fight that I have is with myself. Where the fighting needs to stop is with me, Daryl versus Daryl. That's where the fight needs to stop. And it gets more and more subtle over time. The fight gets very subtle over time. And I see these little things within myself where I'm fighting myself, where I'm supposed to be doing something that I'm paying attention to. And I'm thinking about the next thing that I have to do, or I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to be doing this right now. I got to do that thing. So I'm not focused on what I'm doing. The fights get very, very subtle, but I had to title my book with that because that was my mentor's way of telling me that Daryl, you're just battling with yourself. And until you stop or slow down the battle with yourself, you're going to continue to fight, and you're just going to continue to keep churning the same stuff instead of changing. The third one was from that same mentor, but again, it's something I still think about almost every single day. And when I first heard it, I didn't know what it meant. So I started this new life with the 12 steps. I needed to get over, the alcohol and the drug addiction and start to change my life. And the 12 steps they're really just a blueprint to change. They're a blueprint to adopt a different life and a different way of going about life. So when I was introduced to those 12 steps, I would go to meetings and I would hear people talk about things, and they would say one day at a time, and they would say first things first, and they would say, don't drink and go to meetings. They would say a bunch of things like that were they just became these cliches. And another thing they would say is first things first. And they all made maybe a little bit of sense at that time. And as time goes on, certain things start to make more sense. And that's what happened for me. some of these things started to make more sense as I went along, and I kept them in the back of my head. But one of the things that my mentor said to me was, first things first, and the rest shall be added on. And I didn't really understand what he was saying, but he said, what you have to do is take care of that inner part of you first. You have to get that sorted out. If all I'm doing is reaching and getting my tentacles out there and trying to change everything around me and trying to change people and trying to change circumstances and trying to change all the stuff that's outside my skin, I'm really never going to get anywhere. I'm really never going to make changes that last and changes where, my life actually becomes different. Where life becomes different is in here. And because I'm going to have the same problems no matter where I go, no matter, I'm presenting the world with me. And so whatever I am is what responds to the issues that I face and what responds to the quote unquote problems that I have, whether it's people, places, or things. And so first things first, and the rest shall be added on was so important for me because I finally discovered, and I'm sure people have told me similar things over time, but I finally discovered that if I take care of me, and I take care of my body, and I take care of my mind, and I take care of my heart, and I take care of my soul, when I'm just starting on that journey, that's a full-time job. I don't have time to mess around with everything else. Not that I don't have to do things and pay bills and show up for work and all that sort of stuff. That's sure. We all have to do that. But the emphasis needs to be on me getting better, me developing a relationship with life and with myself where no matter what happens, I'm okay. And that's where it takes you. That's where first things first and the rest shall be added on takes us. It takes us to a completely different life. It takes us to a completely different way of feeling and thinking and responding. And we don't have to take every little piece and fashion it into something. If we do first things first and the rest shall be added on, life will fashion itself into something. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. So those are the three things that have meant the most to me and that I've probably, changed me the most over the course of time. Extremely important for me to hear, and extremely important for me to continue to remember, and to also to try to teach others. So I really hope that it helps, and thank you for listening.